Good day folks, the Pro Audio Journalist here. I'm a firm believer that any decent piece of gear has a place in the studio regardless of its price. Some of the best sounds on records didn't come from conventional units. Some artists even deliberately avoid mainstream units in an effort to sound unique. Now that more and more records are being made in bedrooms, expect to hear more atypical hardware on your records. So today I'm showing you a FET compressor, a unit that may not be as refined sounding as a UA 1176LN, but that's what I love about it. If for example you mix a full-length record, it's my belief that you do want some songs to sound slightly different, shake things up so to say. I would argue that this compressor is largely interchangeable with an 1176, and while there are similarities, it does scream its own character. In some cases, for some songs, it's a better choice than its more expensive big brother. For a couple of reasons, I chose to use the Blackline Audio BLUEY in this comparison. The 7X500 has so much aggressive character that the only 1176 that really comes close is the BLUEY. Also, the Blue Stripe is a sound that we are all familiar with, so it's a good reference point for comparisons. Also, the Blue Stripe is a sound that we are all familiar with, so it's a good reference point for comparisons. I feel the BLA BLUEY is more like a Blue Stripe on steroids, and I feel like the 7X500 is a FET compressor on steroids. It's a good comparison. There will be very slight variances in volume, despite me volume matching, but I'm wanting you to listen for character, behavior and texture, not output level. I'll play each comparison and give you my opinions. Firstly, let's start with bass. Okay, both examples are certainly interchangeable depending on the song in my opinion. The BLUEY feels more classy, it sounds more refined even though there's some grit to it. The 7X500 just has more balls. It sounds dirtier, more like it's on edge, more like an API in my opinion. It's more saturated, more harmonic distortion and less pretty. That's a good tone to have in the arsenal. If I was compressing a bass player with an 1176 and they said they wanted to sound angrier, I think the 7X500 is something worth reaching for. Both handle the low end well, locking it down. The 7X500 does sound bigger in some ways, despite it actually being slightly tighter. Yeah, it kind of sounds like a temperamental API to me. I'll make a few more comments in closing at the end of the video. Next up we have guitars, and we'll start with the BLUEY this time. Okay, in some ways these are so close that it's hard to comprehend the price difference, But in a game of inches, there are differences that are going to shape the feel of your song. In a comparison like this, it really comes down to what you think the listener will subconsciously feel. The BLUEY really does sound divine though. The 7X500 is slightly thicker in the low mids, which is kind of nice for this guitar part. Once again, both units lock down the low end. The 7X500 feels a bit more unchained. It reminds me of a warm API tone, more saturation, more angry sounding. No shortage of third order harmonics, I think. But honestly, these are completely interchangeable, which I hope will tempt some buyers. If I was doing a punk rock record, I'd definitely be using the 7X500 quite a bit. I'd at least be auditioning it with the band on certain parts. I do have to say again though, that the BLUEY really does shine in this example. I'll keep my other comments for the end of the video as there's a bit of a general theme here with the 7X500. Next up, we have drums. Okay, some big differences here. I'll keep this passage short as it's pretty obvious what the differences are here. You'll hear more stereo separation from the 7X500 because the units have so much non-linear behavior. It creates a wide stereo image. The 7X500 definitely has a lot more usable punch in this example. It sounds bigger, it sounds more analog, and it sounds more spanky. The 7X500 does some things really well, and this is one of them. On drums is where I discovered just how versatile the 7X500 really is. Beautiful frequency response from this unit here too. It sounds quite pleasant. Once again, it sounds like an API and an 1176 had a baby. Lastly, we'll do a quick comparison of some vocals.
I could never find the words, so I went out into the world. Maybe I could discover myself and things I needed to say to make our dreams a reality. I could never find the words, so I went out into the world. Maybe I could discover myself and things I needed to say to make our dreams a reality.
Okay, some big differences here again. This vocal is not the greatest to use for comparisons because there is an amount of harmonic distortion baked into the original track, but you can still hear the difference between both units if you listen closely. The 7X500 sounds more aggressive again, once again sounding more like a saturated API in my opinion. Definitely usable if you're wanting a dirtier, angrier sound. The BLUEY obviously sounds amazing in this example. However, the frequency response of the 7X500 is decently nice. In closing, the 7X500 isn't your average 1176. I've found that you have to pull sounds out of it, and it's really temperamental and has tons of non-linear behavior. It's almost unpredictable in some cases. But that's what's so fun about it. The quicker the attack time, the more distortion that's added in some cases. On vocals, using the quickest attack time is unfortunately almost too much. If you want it to sound pretty, you really have to use it lightly, and if you want it to sound angry, that's actually quite easy. I will say that I've gotten some of the best sounds I've ever heard come out of an 1176 with this unit. At $299 US, my advice is buy 4 for the studio, at least a pair. Some songs do call for them. I'd be pretty interested in a Mark II version if it ever comes, and I'd like to see the design further refined, but maybe that would take away from what I love so much about these little beasts. If you'd like to see me put it up against a UA 1176, let me know. And yes, I chose to compress this voiceover with the 7X500. I'm the Pro Audio Journalist. I'll see you in the next one.